Emma froze mid-stride, the manila folder clutched in her tiny hands. All conversations in the Veterans Support Services reception area died instantly. It wasn't an adult standing before the imposing mahogany desk. It was a 6-year-old girl wearing what appeared to be a crudely altered wedding dress, its silky fabric pooling around her scuffed Mary Jane shoes. Is that a child?" whispered Diane, coffee sloshing over her cup's edge as she backed into a filing cabinet. 3 other staff members stood slack-jawed, pens and papers suspended in mid-motion as if time itself had stopped. The receptionist's hand trembled as she reached across the counter, her mind flashing to her own daughter safely in 2nd grade, not alone downtown in a building full of strangers. "Call Mr. Anderson," someone hissed urgently, though no one moved, transfixed by the surreal tableau. What desperate circumstances would drive a kindergartner to walk into a veteran's office alone? And what would the notoriously strict Major Anderson do when he saw her? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Veterans Support Services occupied a modest 2-story brick building in downtown Portland, its navy blue door bearing a simple plaque, an American flag, that distinguished it from the coffee shops and boutiques lining the street. Inside, the organization operated with military precision, a reflection of its founder, Major Matthew Anderson. At 38, Anderson carried himself with the rigid posture of someone who had spent 15 years in military service. 3 tours in Afghanistan had left him with a slight limp from shrapnel wounds and nightmares he rarely discussed. The folded flag in his glass-fronted office cabinet belonged to his brother Thomas, who hadn't made it home. "We have standards here," was Anderson's common refrain. His employees admired his dedication but feared his exacting expectations. No excuses, no exceptions. Those were the rules that had built Veterans Support Services from a one-man operation into a respected lifeline for returning soldiers. Most mornings found him at his desk by 6 a.m. reviewing cases of veterans fighting bureaucratic battles for benefits, housing, and mental health services. This Thursday was no different, his coffee growing cold as he prepared for the final administrative assistant interview at 9 a.m. 10 miles across town in a run-down apartment complex, Rebecca Wilson had been awake since 4 a.m., shivering despite the early summer heat. At 32, her once vibrant face had grown gaunt, blonde hair dulled by stress and illness. The thermometer read 102.3 degrees, pneumonia, the urgent care doctor had said yesterday, but the interview at Veterans Support Services couldn't be rescheduled. "Just a few more hours," she whispered, easing herself upright as pain radiated through her joints. Hidden beneath her determination was a more serious diagnosis, an autoimmune disease that had emptied their savings and filled their apartment with unpaid medical bills. In the tiny bedroom they shared, 6-year-old Emily slept surrounded by carefully arranged stuffed animals. Unlike other children her age, Emily understood terms like past due and final notice. She knew which pharmacies would let them pay later and which landlords would accept partial rent. Rebecca had tried to shield her daughter from adult worries, but necessity had made Emily observant beyond her years. On the kitchen counter sat Rebecca's carefully prepared interview materials, resume printed on the library's good paper, references typed neatly, even a handwritten note from her former English professor. This job would mean health insurance, regular hours, and perhaps enough stability to finally catch her breath. "Please," she had prayed the night before, "just this one break." Neither Rebecca nor Major Anderson could have anticipated how their lives would collide, not through a formal interview, but through the determined actions of a little girl in a too-large wedding dress carrying hope in a folder almost as big as herself. Rebecca Wilson's fingers trembled as she pressed the phone to her ear, her breathing shallow and rapid from the fever burning through her fragile frame. The digital clock on her nightstand read 8:07 a.m. Her interview was in less than an hour. I... I'm so sorry, she managed, her voice barely audible. I've been admitted to the hospital with pneumonia. I truly want to come. I've been preparing for weeks, but right now Ma'am? The voice on the other end cut in, cool and unbending. Veterans Support Services does not reschedule interviews. Major Anderson is very clear on this policy. If you are not present at the designated time, your application will be disqualified. Thank you. The line went dead before Rebecca could respond. Her arm fell limply to her side as she stared at the hospital ceiling, tears welling in her eyes. The IV in her arm pulled uncomfortably as she turned to look at the worn leather bag clutched against her side, her lifeline. Inside was her resume, carefully typed and printed the night before, protected in a clear folder. A tiny, hopeful note she had written to herself rested on top. This is the start of something better. Please, she whispered, the word barely audible over the beeping monitors. Do not take this chance away from me. My daughter needs this. She deserves more. In the quiet corner of the sterile hospital room, Emily Wilson sat curled on a plastic chair, legs swinging above the floor. At 6 years old, her honey blonde hair was tied back with a red ribbon that matched her favorite sneakers. Her blue eyes, observant and serious, hadn't missed a single detail of her mother's conversation. Emily had watched her mother make sacrifices every single day of her young life. She'd watched her come home late from cleaning houses, exhausted but still finding energy to read bedtime stories. She'd watched her fix their broken toaster with duct tape and a butter knife. She'd watched her skip dinner so Emily could eat. And now, Emily had watched her mother cry. When Rebecca finally drifted into a restless sleep, overcome by medication and fever, Emily stood on the chair and leaned over to gently brush a strand of hair from her mother's damp forehead. Then, with the quiet determination that had become her hallmark, she climbed down and tiptoed to her mother's bag. Emily unzipped it slowly, careful not to make a sound. She took out the clear folder containing the resume, the one her mother had revised countless times, the one she'd seen her mother stare at every night for a week, practicing answers to imaginary questions. The little girl stood for a long moment, looking between her sleeping mother and the folder. Then she turned toward the room's small closet where the nurse had hung her mother's few belongings. Among them was a garment bag Emily had never seen before. Curiosity drew her forward. Inside was something unexpected. A simple white wedding dress, carefully preserved despite its age. Emily had seen pictures of her mother wearing it, standing beside a man in uniform who had left before Emily was born. Without fully understanding why, she knew this dress was important, special in a way other clothes weren't. With careful movements, Emily pulled the dress from its hanger. It was far too large, of course, but that didn't stop her. She slipped it over her t-shirt and shorts, the silky material pooling around her feet like a royal train. From her mother's purse, she retrieved a small pair of safety scissors and with surprising dexterity cut several strategic slits in the fabric, creating a makeshift dress that she could at least walk in without tripping. A plan had formed in Emily's mind, simple and clear as only a child's plans can be. If her mother couldn't go to the important interview, she would go instead. She would explain that her mother was sick but really wanted the job. Surely adults would understand that. With both hands clutching the oversized folder, Emily padded out of the hospital room and down the hallway. She passed nurses and patients and the coffee machine that her mother said never worked right. No one noticed her, or if they did, they assumed she was heading to the children's ward or the cafeteria. Adults rarely questioned a child who moved with purpose. She found her way to the ground floor and out into the morning sunshine. The city bustled around her, people moving too quickly to notice a small girl in an altered wedding dress walking alone with determination in every step. Emily knew where she needed to go. She had memorized the address from the papers on their refrigerator. More importantly, she knew which bus to take, the number 15, because her mother had pointed it out yesterday. "That's the bus I'll take tomorrow for my big interview." Emily had $5 in her pocket, birthday money she'd been saving for a special occasion. This, she decided, was definitely special enough. She waited at the bus stop, ignoring the curious glances from other passengers, and boarded confidently when the number 15 arrived. "Child's fare, please," she told the driver, standing on tiptoes to slide her money through the payment slot. The driver raised an eyebrow but said nothing as he handed her a ticket. Emily chose a seat near the front, clutching the precious folder to her chest as though it contained magic, as though it could change everything. 40 minutes later, after carefully counting the stops just as her mother had taught her, Emily stood before a brick building with a navy blue door and a simple plaque that read, "Veterans Support Services." She took a deep breath, straightened the wedding dress as best she could, and walked in. The reception area buzzed with the usual morning rhythm, footsteps clicking against the tile floor, quiet conversations, the hum of a copy machine. Behind the front desk, Emma Thompson was reviewing the day's schedule when a small shadow fell across her desk. Emma looked up, and her professional demeanor momentarily cracked. A little girl stood there, no taller than the counter itself, wearing what appeared to be a modified wedding dress with safety pins visible along the sides. Her honey blonde hair was partially secured with a red ribbon, and her blue eyes were wide, curious, and utterly serious. In her hands, she clutched a folder almost half her size. "Sweetheart," Emma said slowly, leaning over the counter, "are you looking for someone? Are you lost?" The girl shook her head with certainty. "I'm here for the job interview," she said simply. There was a pause as Emma tried to process what she'd just heard. "Interview?" she echoed, stunned. "Yes," the girl said, lifting the folder higher. "It's my mom's. She's really good, but she's sick today, so I came instead." Emma stared at the child, completely at a loss for words. Around them, several employees had slowed their pace, watching the scene unfold with growing interest. "What's your name, sweetie?" Emma finally managed. "Emily. Emily Wilson. And my mom's name is Rebecca Wilson." Emma quickly scanned her list, half expecting not to find the name. But there it was. Rebecca Wilson, scheduled for 9 a.m., the final candidate for the administrative assistant position. The position Major Anderson had been trying to fill for 3 months, rejecting every applicant as insufficiently qualified or committed. Okay, Emily," Emma said, pressing her intercom button. "One moment, please." Upstairs in his glass-walled office overlooking the Portland skyline, Major Matthew Anderson sat alone at his desk, reviewing the final candidate's resume with a critical eye. Former English major, incomplete degree, work history showing a series of low-paying jobs, not promising, but at least this one had some experience with administrative tasks. The intercom buzzed. "Major Anderson, you need to come down. It's about your 9 interview." Anderson sighed, checking his watch. "Is she late? If so, you know the policy." "No, sir," Emma replied, and Anderson detected an unusual note in her voice. "She's... Well, you should just come see for yourself." Irritated at the disruption but curious despite himself, Anderson made his way downstairs. As the elevator doors opened to the reception area, he was greeted by a sight so unexpected that he stopped short. There she was, barely taller than his desk nameplate, standing in the middle of the lobby in what appeared to be a child-sized version of a wedding gown, holding a folder with a determined expression that seemed utterly incongruous on such a young face. "Major Anderson?" Emma said tentatively. "This is Emily Wilson. She's here for her mother's interview." Emily turned at the sound of his name, her eyes widening slightly at the tall man with the military bearing and stern expression. But instead of shrinking back as most children did upon meeting him, she straightened her shoulders and extended her small hand in greeting. "You're the boss," she said matter-of-factly. "I'm here to show you my mom's paper. She's sick, but she really wants this job, and I think she deserves it." The reception area fell completely silent. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see how the notoriously strict Anderson would respond to this unprecedented situation. His expression remained unreadable as he looked from the child to the folder she was offering with both hands. Then, something unexpected happened. The corners of Anderson's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but the closest thing to it that anyone at Veteran Support Services had seen in months. "Emma," he said, his voice measured, "clear my schedule for the next 15 minutes. Emma blinked in surprise. "Sir?" "But your call with Senator Hayes." "Can wait," he finished firmly. He turned back to Emily and gestured toward the hallway. "Shall we?" Emily's face lit up with a smile so bright it seemed to transform the entire room. She nodded eagerly and followed him, the altered wedding dress dragging slightly behind her like a royal train as she marched confidently down the corridor. Inside his office, Major Anderson pulled out a chair for Emily. She climbed up with practiced confidence, placing her feet on the bar below, the wedding dress billowing around her. The large leather chair seemed to swallow her small frame, but she sat upright, maintaining perfect posture that unconsciously mirrored Anderson's own military bearing. Anderson took his seat across from her, accepting the folder she thrust forward. He opened it carefully, scanning Rebecca Wilson's resume while occasionally glancing at the child. The resume was neatly formatted, printed on quality paper, clearly the work of someone who had put considerable effort into presentation despite limited resources. "So, Emily," he said, adjusting his tone to something gentler than his usual clipped manner, "tell me why your mother wants to work here." Emily leaned forward slightly, resting her small hands on the edge of his desk. Her voice was clear, not rehearsed, just honest. "Mom works really hard," she said. "She cleans houses in the morning and takes care of old people in the afternoon. Sometimes she delivers food at night when I'm at Mrs. Patel's apartment. She never stops, except when she reads me stories." Anderson nodded, encouraging her to continue. "She doesn't buy anything for herself," Emily added. "Even when her shoes have holes, she says, 'No, these are still good,' and then she buys me new ones instead." She pointed to her red sneakers with tiny stars on the sides, clearly new, carefully chosen. Anderson glanced down at the resume again, noting the employment history. House cleaner, home health aide, food delivery service, each job overlapping with the others. No gaps in employment, just an endless stream of low-paying positions that together might barely cover rent in Portland's increasingly expensive housing market. "Your mother went to college?" he asked, noting the incomplete degree listed. Emily nodded enthusiastically. "She studied English. She knows all the books. She helps me read big words and writes the best notes for my lunchbox." Her face grew more serious. "But she had to stop school because of me." "Because of you?" Anderson prompted gently. "She had me," Emily said simply. "And my dad left. Mom says he wasn't ready to be a dad." Anderson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He was intimately familiar with abandonment, with promises broken and responsibilities shirked. His brother Thomas had been abandoned by the very system he had sacrificed for, left to battle PTSD and depression alone until he could fight no longer. "Does your mother have family to help?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "Just me and her. Grandma and Grandpa are in heaven. Grandpa was a soldier too. Mom has his medals in a special box." Anderson's interest sharpened. "Your grandfather was military?" "Vietnam. Emily said, pronouncing the word carefully. Mom says he was very brave but also very sad when he came home. Anderson nodded, understanding immediately what went unsaid. Another veteran failed by the system, one of thousands who returned from Vietnam to inadequate support and social rejection. "And why did you come here today, Emily?" he asked. "All by yourself?" "Because Mom was really sad when she hung up the phone," Emily replied. "She was crying. She said this job would give us a better life." Her voice wavered slightly. "The hospital wouldn't let me stay with her because of rules about kids. I remembered the address from the paper on our fridge." "How did you get here?" Anderson asked, increasingly concerned about how far this child had traveled alone. "I took the bus. Number 15. I had $5 in my piggy bank." She looked down at her hands before adding, "I'm not supposed to cross the street by myself, but this was important." Anderson studied the little girl before him. In 15 years of military service, he had witnessed remarkable courage. Soldiers rushing into gunfire to save comrades, medics working under impossible conditions, civilians enduring unimaginable hardship. But there was something uniquely brave about this 6-year-old navigating a city alone, driven by love for her mother. He closed the folder gently. "Well then," he said, "I suppose we should begin the interview." For the next 10 minutes, Anderson asked Emily questions about her mother. Not the standard interview questions about skills and experience, but about character, work ethic, and perseverance. Emily answered each question with disarming honesty, painting a portrait of a woman who had sacrificed everything for her child while maintaining dignity and hope despite overwhelming odds. "Mom is super smart," Emily insisted. "She helps me with all my homework, even the hard math, and she always remembers everything, doctor appointments, when to take medicine, birthdays. She knows how to fix things too. When our toilet broke, the landlord wouldn't come, so she watched videos and fixed it herself." Anderson raised an eyebrow, impressed despite himself. "She's also really nice to people who are sad," Emily continued. "She says everyone deserves kindness, especially when they're having a hard time." "That's important in our work," Anderson agreed. "We help veterans who are often going through difficult times." "Like soldiers?" Emily asked, her eyes widening. "Like Grandpa? Mom says he came back from the war different." "PTSD," Anderson said quietly, more to himself than to Emily. "Post-traumatic stress disorder, the invisible wound that had claimed his brother 3 years after his honorable discharge." A soft knock interrupted them. Emma stood in the doorway, her expression concerned. "Sir, Portland General Hospital is on line 1. It seems our young visitor here has caused quite a stir by disappearing." Anderson nodded, pressing the intercom. "This is Major Anderson. Yes? Emily Wilson is safe with us at Veteran Support Services." He paused, listening. "Yes, I understand the concern. We'll bring her back immediately." Emily's face fell. "Am I in trouble?" "No," Anderson assured her. "But your mother must be very worried. Let's get you back to her." As they walked toward the elevator, Emily looked up at him anxiously. "What about Mom's job? Will you still talk to her?" Anderson hesitated, then made a decision that would later prove pivotal. "I'll speak with her when she's feeling better." 20 minutes later, Anderson's government-issue SUV pulled up to Portland General's main entrance. He had insisted on driving Emily himself, despite Emma's offer to handle it. Something about this situation, this child, her mother's story, had penetrated his carefully constructed professional distance. The hospital was in a state of controlled chaos. Security guards were reviewing surveillance footage, nurses were checking every floor, and a police officer was taking statements. When Anderson walked through the automatic doors with Emily holding his hand, the relief was palpable. "Emily!" A nurse rushed forward. "We've been looking everywhere for you." Emily clung to Anderson's hand. "I went to Mom's job interview." This is Major Anderson. He's the boss." The nurse looked at Anderson with a mixture of relief and curiosity. "Thank you for bringing her back. Her mother is frantic. We had to sedate her when she discovered Emily was missing." Anderson's expression darkened. "Sedate her? She's ill with pneumonia." "Yes, but the stress sent her into a crisis. Her condition is complicated." The nurse hesitated. "Are you family?" "No," Anderson replied. He paused, unsure how to define his relationship to a woman he had never met. "I'm considering her for a position at my organization." The nurse nodded, though her expression suggested she found the situation unusual. "Room 412. The doctor is with her now." As they rode the elevator, Emily still clutching his hand, Anderson found himself in unfamiliar territory. His world was one of clear boundaries and protocols. This, escorting a child in a wedding dress to her hospitalized mother after an impromptu job interview, fell well outside standard operating procedure. Room 412 was at the end of a long corridor. The door was partially open, and inside, Anderson could see a slender woman in a hospital bed, an IV in her arm, and monitors beeping steadily beside her. Her blonde hair, the same honey shade as Emily's, lay damp against her pale face. A doctor stood at her bedside, checking her vitals. "Mom!" Emily broke free from Anderson's hand and ran into the room. Rebecca Wilson's eyes flew open. "Emily?" "Oh my God!" She struggled to sit up, arms outstretched to her daughter. "Where were you? I was so worried." Emily climbed onto the bed, the wedding dress tangling around her legs. "I went to your interview, Mom. I met Major Anderson and told him all about you." Rebecca froze, noticing Anderson for the first time. Her face drained of what little color it had as comprehension dawned. She looked from her daughter in the altered wedding dress to the tall, imposing man in the doorway and back again. "You... what?" she whispered, horror spreading across her features. Anderson stepped forward, extending his hand. "Major Matthew Anderson, Veterans Support Services. Your daughter made quite an impression." Rebecca's hand trembled as she reached out to shake his, her embarrassment painfully evident. "Major Anderson, I am so sorry about this. I don't know what Emily was thinking. I would never—" He raised a hand, stopping her apology. "Your daughter gave one of the most compelling interviews I've ever witnessed." Rebecca blinked in surprise, still struggling to process the situation. "She also managed to navigate public transportation, find our office, and advocate for you with more conviction than most professional representatives." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "She's quite remarkable." Rebecca looked at Emily, who beamed proudly. "I told him all about you, Mom, how smart you are and how hard you work, and about Grandpa's medals." "You told him about Grandpa?" Rebecca asked, her voice softening. Anderson nodded. "Emily mentioned your father was a veteran. Vietnam?" "Yes," Rebecca said quietly. "2 tours. He struggled after he came home." "My brother served in Afghanistan," Anderson offered, surprising himself with the personal disclosure. "Same story." A moment of silent recognition passed between them, the unspoken bond of those who had watched war change someone they loved. The doctor, who had been observing this exchange with professional interest, cleared his throat. "Ms. Wilson needs rest. Her pneumonia is complicated by her underlying condition." "Underlying condition?" Anderson inquired before he could stop himself. Rebecca looked away, clearly uncomfortable. "It's nothing serious," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. The doctor gave her a pointed look but respected her privacy. "We'll need to keep her for at least 48 hours for observation and IV antibiotics." Emily's face fell. "But who will take care of me?" Rebecca bit her lip, worry creasing her forehead. "Mrs. Patel is visiting her daughter in Seattle. I'll call the agency and see if they can—" "I want to stay with you." Emily insisted, clinging to her mother's hand. Hospital policy doesn't allow, the doctor began. I'll make arrangements, Anderson interrupted, surprising everyone, including himself. We have resources for veterans' families in crisis situations. I'll have someone contact you about temporary child care options. Rebecca stared at him, confusion and gratitude warring in her expression. Why would you do that? You don't even know us. Anderson hesitated, then reached into his pocket and placed a business card on her bedside table. When you're feeling better, Ms. Wilson, I'd like to interview you properly for the administrative position. Given your background and Emily's advocacy, I think you might be well suited for our organization. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. You're still considering me? Even after this? She gestured vaguely, encompassing the hospital room, her illness, her daughter's unauthorized field trip. Especially after this, Anderson replied. Our organization deals with crisis management every day. We need people who can handle unexpected situations with grace. He paused, then added, and who understand personally what our veterans and their families go through. As he turned to leave, Anderson paused at the door. One more thing, Ms. Wilson. Veterans Support Services offers comprehensive benefits, including health insurance from day one and flexible scheduling for single parents. After he left, Rebecca pulled Emily close, her heart too full for words. Did I help, Mommy? Emily whispered. Rebecca kissed her daughter's forehead. You did something very dangerous, and we need to talk about that. But yes, my brave girl, you helped. As Anderson drove back to his office, his thoughts remained with the woman and child in room 412. Something about their situation had stirred memories he usually kept carefully locked away. His brother's struggles, his own rigid response, the regrets that followed. Perhaps in Rebecca and Emily Wilson he had been given a second chance to get it right. 3 weeks later, Rebecca Wilson walked into Veterans Support Services for her official first day. Her navy blue dress was secondhand but carefully pressed, her resume now professionally printed in a proper folder. The pneumonia had resolved, but she still moved with the careful deliberation of someone conserving energy. Emma greeted her warmly at the reception desk. Rebecca, welcome aboard. Emily's not with you today? She's at school, Rebecca replied with a smile. Where 6-year-olds belong. The office was busy but organized, filled with the quiet purpose of people who understood service. Anderson met her at the door to his office, extending his hand formally. Ms. Wilson, welcome to the team. Thank you, Major Anderson. I won't let you down. He nodded, all business now. Your desk is there. Emma will show you the systems. We have a staff meeting at 10 o'clock. As Rebecca settled in, learning the computer systems and filing protocols, she couldn't help but notice how Anderson ran the office, with precision but also with unexpected compassion. He knew every veteran by name, remembered their families, their struggles, their victories. During lunch, Emma filled her in on the background. He started this place after his brother died. PTSD. The VA failed him, and James never got over it. Now he's determined that no other veteran falls through the cracks. He seems intense, Rebecca observed, watching Anderson across the room as he patiently explained benefit options to an elderly veteran. Emma smiled. He is. But there's a good heart under all that military discipline. You should have seen him with Emily that day. It was the first time many of us had ever seen him truly smile. Rebecca's gaze lingered on Anderson. She'd been surprised when he called the hospital personally to check on her recovery, even more surprised when he arranged for Emily to stay with a Veterans Family Support volunteer during her hospitalization. The kindness seemed at odds with his reputation for strictness. Her first week passed in a blur of training and orientation. Rebecca absorbed information quickly, her attention to detail and organizational skills immediately apparent. By week 2, she had reorganized the filing system, created a more efficient calendar for appointments, and written a guide for veterans navigating the complex paperwork for benefits. "You're good at this," Anderson remarked one evening as she was preparing to leave. He had stopped by her desk to review a report she'd compiled. "Thank you, sir," she replied, still formal with him despite his encouragement to call him Matthew. "I appreciate the opportunity." He studied her for a moment. "How's Emily adjusting to the new schedule?" "She's thriving," Rebecca said, her face softening at the mention of her daughter. "She loves the after-school program, and having health insurance for her regular checkups is—" Her voice caught slightly. "It's life-changing." Anderson nodded, understanding the weight of those words. "And your health?" he asked, his tone careful. He had noticed her occasional winces, the way she sometimes stopped typing to flex her fingers when she thought no one was watching. "I'm fine," she said quickly, too quickly. Anderson didn't press the issue, but he made a mental note. The underlying condition the doctor had mentioned remained a mystery, one Rebecca clearly preferred to keep private. As weeks turned into months, Rebecca became an integral part of the office. Veterans sought her out, finding in her a patient listener who could translate military experience into the civilian language of forms and requirements. She remembered their stories, followed up on their cases, celebrated their victories, and stood firm beside their defeats. One Tuesday afternoon, the office door opened to reveal Emily, accompanied by her after-school program coordinator. Rebecca looked up in surprise. "Emily, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "Half day at school," Emily explained, rushing forward to hug her mother. "Teacher conferences." Rebecca closed her eyes briefly. "I completely forgot. I'm so sorry, sweetie." "It's no problem," the coordinator assured her. "We knew you'd be working. I thought we'd stop by on our way to the park so Emily could say hello." Emily was already circling the office, greeting everyone by name. When she reached Anderson's office, she knocked confidently on the open door. "Major Anderson? Look, I drew this for you." She thrust forward a colorful drawing. Anderson set aside the report he'd been reviewing and accepted the artwork. It showed 3 figures standing before what appeared to be the Veterans Support Services building, a tall man in a suit, a woman with blonde hair, and a small girl between them, all holding hands. "It's us," Emily explained unnecessarily. "You, me, and Mom." Anderson studied the drawing, something shifting in his expression. "Thank you, Emily. This is excellent work." "Can I put it on your wall?" she asked, pointing to the bare space beside his military commendations. Anderson hesitated, then nodded. "I think we can find a spot for it." From across the office, Rebecca watched this exchange with a mixture of embarrassment and something warmer she couldn't quite name. She had noticed Anderson softening over the past months, not just with Emily, but with the staff, with veterans, even with himself. The rigid military bearing remained, but it seemed less like armor and more like habit. That evening, after Emily had been picked up by the after-school program coordinator, Rebecca stayed late to complete a benefits application for an elderly veteran. The office had emptied gradually until only she and Anderson remained. "You don't have to finish that tonight," Anderson said, pausing by her desk on his way out. "Tomorrow would be fine." Rebecca shook her head. "Mr. Jenkins needs his medication approval by Friday. If I submit this tonight, it might just make it through processing in time." Anderson nodded, understanding the urgency. The VA's bureaucracy moved at its own pace, regardless of veterans' needs. "Would you like some coffee? I was about to make a fresh pot." The offer surprised her. "That would be nice. Thank you." He returned a few minutes later with 2 mugs, setting one beside her keyboard. For a moment, he seemed uncertain whether to leave or stay. "The drawing Emily gave you," Rebecca said, breaking the silence. "I'm sorry if it was inappropriate. She's developed quite an attachment to the office." "To the office," Anderson repeated. a hint of amusement in his voice. Is that what we're calling it? Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. She talks about you all the time. Major Anderson this, Major Anderson that. I've tried to explain professional boundaries, but she's 6 and— Rebecca, he interrupted gently. The drawing is fine. More than fine. It's the first personal item I've put in that office in 5 years. She looked up, surprised by this admission. When I founded Veterans Support Services, he continued, I had a very clear mission: help veterans navigate the system that failed my brother. Keep it professional, efficient, impersonal. He took a sip of his coffee. I didn't expect a 6-year-old in a wedding dress to make me question that approach. Rebecca smiled despite herself. That dress was my wedding dress. Emily found it in the hospital closet. I'd forgotten it was even there. Your wedding dress? Anderson asked, leaning against the desk. I assumed it was a costume. Rebecca's smile faded slightly. No, it was real. I was married, very briefly, to Emily's father. He was a Marine deployed to Iraq. When he came home, he was different, angry, unpredictable. She looked down at her hands. He left before Emily was born, said he couldn't handle it. Fatherhood, marriage, civilian life, any of it. Anderson's expression darkened. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said quickly. We're better off. He wasn't ready to be a father, and Emily deserves better. Anderson nodded, understanding the unspoken, better than what he'd had himself. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft clicking of Rebecca's keyboard as she finished the application. When she finally submitted it, a small sigh of relief escaped her. Done, she announced, stretching carefully. Anderson noticed her wince as she rolled her shoulders. Your health condition, he said quietly. It's more than just recovering from pneumonia, isn't it? Rebecca stiffened. I can do my job. I know you can. That's not what I'm asking. She was silent for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she said, I have an autoimmune condition. Rheumatoid arthritis, primarily, though they're still running tests. It's manageable with medication. She didn't mention that the medication cost more than her previous monthly rent, or that before this job she'd often had to choose between treatment and groceries. Anderson absorbed this information without visible reaction. Does it affect your daily life? Some days are better than others, she admitted, but I don't let it interfere with my work. I never suggested you did. He hesitated, then added, My brother had chronic pain from his injuries. He hid it well. Too well. None of us knew how bad it was until— He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Rebecca nodded, understanding. I'm not hiding it from Emily. She knows there are good days and bad days, but I don't want her to worry, and I don't want anyone here to think I can't handle my responsibilities. No one would think that, Anderson assured her. Least of all, me. Their conversation was interrupted by Anderson's phone ringing. He checked the screen, his expression shifting to concern. I need to take this. It's Senator Hayes. He stood, moving toward his office. Don't stay too late, Rebecca. Mr. Jenkins' medication will still be there in the morning. After he left, Rebecca sat quietly, reflecting on their conversation. It was the most personal interaction they'd had since her first day, and something about it left her feeling both unsettled and oddly comforted. As October turned to November, the office began preparations for Veterans Day, their busiest time of year. Rebecca took charge of organizing the annual ceremony, coordinating with local officials, arranging for speakers, and ensuring every detail was perfect. Anderson watched her work with growing admiration, impressed by her efficiency and genuine care for the veterans they served. One afternoon, a week before the ceremony, a new visitor arrived at the office. An elderly man in a wheelchair, his Vietnam veteran cap worn proudly despite his frail appearance. I'm looking for Rebecca Wilson, he told Emma at reception. Rebecca looked up from her desk, surprised. "Mr. Jenkins, what are you doing here?" The elderly veteran wheeled himself toward her desk, a broad smile on his weathered face. "Got my medication approval yesterday. Figured I should thank you in person." He reached into a bag hanging from his wheelchair and pulled out a small gift, a hand-carved wooden box with intricate designs. "Made this for you," he said gruffly. "Nothing fancy but solid oak." "Should last." Rebecca accepted the gift with genuine appreciation. "Mr. Jenkins, it's beautiful. Thank you." "Been carving since '75, he explained. "Helps with the shakes." He tapped his temple, referring to the PTSD that had haunted him for decades. "Keeps the ghosts at bay, you know." Rebecca nodded, understanding his meaning. She had seen her father use similar coping mechanisms: fishing, gardening, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind occupied. From his office doorway, Anderson observed this interaction. He'd known Harold Jenkins for years, a tough case, resistant to help, deeply distrustful of authority. Yet here he was, giving a handmade gift to a woman he'd met only once. Later, when Rebecca brought files for Anderson's signature, he nodded toward the wooden box now sitting on her desk. "Jenkins doesn't give those to just anyone. You made quite an impression." Rebecca smiled. "He reminded me of my father." "Same generation, same war, same struggles. Your father was in Vietnam?" She nodded. 2 tours, 101st Airborne. He came home with medals and nightmares. "And he passed away?" Anderson asked gently. "When I was 19, second semester of college." Her voice held the carefully measured tone of someone who had processed grief but still carried it. "He took his own life. The VA had him on a 6-month waiting list for mental health services." Anderson's expression darkened. "I'm sorry. That's too familiar a story." "That's why this work matters," Rebecca said simply. "For all the Harold Jenkinses and fathers and brothers who shouldn't have to fight another war just to get help." Anderson looked at her with new understanding. He had assumed her interest in the job was primarily about stability and benefits for her daughter. Now he recognized something deeper, a personal mission not unlike his own. The next day, Emily visited the office after school again, this time accompanied by a social worker. "Miss Wilson?" the social worker asked, approaching Rebecca's desk. "I'm Janet Mercer from Child Protective Services. Could we speak privately?" Rebecca's heart froze. "Is Emily okay?" "She's fine," Janet assured her, gesturing to where Emily sat in the waiting area, happily coloring. "Just some routine questions." Anderson, emerging from a meeting, noticed the exchange and the official-looking visitor. "You can use my office," he offered, his tone neutral but his eyes questioning. Rebecca nodded gratefully, leading the social worker into Anderson's office and closing the door. 20 minutes later, Rebecca emerged, her face pale but composed. The social worker thanked Anderson for the use of his office and left with a promise to be in touch. "Everything okay?" Anderson asked quietly as Rebecca returned to her desk. "Fine," she said tightly. "Just a misunderstanding." But later that evening, as they were again the last two in the office, Rebecca's composure cracked. A file slipped from her trembling hands, scattering papers across the floor. When she bent to retrieve them, a soft sound escaped her, part sigh, part suppressed sob. Anderson was beside her instantly, helping gather the documents. "Rebecca, what's going on?" She straightened, wiping hastily at her eyes. "It's nothing. I'm fine." "It's not nothing," he countered. "Is it about the social worker's visit?" Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. "Emily's teacher noticed bruises on her arms. Protocol requires them to report it." She took a shaky breath. "The bruises are from where I grabbed her, not in anger, but to keep her from running into the street after a ball. My grip was too tight because—" She flexed her hands, wincing slightly. Bad day with the arthritis. Anderson's relief was visible. That's all. A misunderstanding that can be cleared up? Maybe, Rebecca said, her voice strained. But they're also concerned about our living situation. Our apartment building failed several code inspections. The landlord hasn't fixed the heat. There's mold in some units. She shook her head. They're not accusing me of anything, but they're monitoring us now. Can you move? Anderson asked practically. Rebecca gave a hollow laugh. On my salary, in this rental market, even with this job, I'm still paying off hospital bills. Every decent apartment wants first and last month's rent plus a security deposit. That's 3 months' rent up front. Anderson was silent, considering. Then he said, Veterans Support Services has a transitional housing program. It's primarily for veterans, but we've made exceptions for families in crisis situations. Rebecca stiffened. I'm not taking charity. It's not charity, he countered. It's a program with clear guidelines and expectations. Residents contribute based on income. They participate in community maintenance. It's a hand up, not a handout. She wavered, pride battling necessity. I don't know. At least look at it, Anderson urged. For Emily's sake. At the mention of her daughter, Rebecca's resistance softened. I'll think about it. A week later, Rebecca and Emily moved into a small but clean 2-bedroom apartment in a building owned by Veterans Support Services. The rent was income-based, the utilities included, and most importantly, it passed all code inspections with flying colors. Child Protective Services closed their case, satisfied that any concerns had been addressed. Emily flourished in their new home, delighted to have her own room for the first time in her life. She decorated it with drawings, stuffed animals, and a special shelf for her growing collection of books. Rebecca gradually allowed herself to relax, no longer fearing midnight emergency relocations due to building violations or rent increases. As December approached, the office began to take on a festive atmosphere. Veterans Support Services held an annual holiday gathering for staff, veterans, and their families. Rebecca threw herself into the preparations, determined to make it special for everyone involved. The night of the party, the office was transformed. Twinkling lights hung from the ceiling. A modest tree stood in the corner adorned with handmade ornaments created by veterans' children, and tables of food lined the walls. Rebecca had even arranged for Harold Jenkins and several other elderly veterans to be transported from their homes. Emily, wearing a red dress with white tights, appointed herself official greeter, welcoming each guest with solemn formality that made even the most battle-hardened veterans smile. When Anderson arrived, she raced to him with unconcealed delight. "Major Anderson, come see, Mr. Harold is teaching me chess." She pulled him toward a corner where Harold Jenkins had set up a chessboard on a low table. The elderly veteran nodded in greeting. "Evening, Major. Just showing the little lady here the ropes. Got a good mind for strategy, this one." Anderson watched as Emily carefully moved a pawn, her face screwed up in concentration. "My brother taught me chess," he said quietly. "Said it helped him think 3 moves ahead in combat." Harold nodded. "Smart man, your brother." "Yes, he was," Anderson agreed, the past tense hanging heavy in the air. Across the room, Rebecca watched this interaction, warmth spreading through her chest. Something had changed in Anderson over these months. A softening around the edges, moments of gentle humor, a willingness to engage beyond professional necessity. And something had changed in her too, a growing trust, a cautious hope, a sense that perhaps the world wasn't entirely arrayed against them after all. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Anderson found Rebecca in the kitchen, packing leftover food into containers. "You've done an amazing job with this," he said, gesturing to the gathering. "Everyone's had a wonderful time." Rebecca smiled, pleased by the recognition. "It was a team effort." "No, It was primarily your effort, he corrected. You have a gift for bringing people together. Before she could respond, Emily appeared in the doorway. Mom, Mr. Harold's daughter is here to take him home. He wants to say goodbye to you. Rebecca wiped her hands on a towel. I'll be right there. As she moved to leave, Anderson said, Rebecca, would you and Emily like to have dinner sometime? Not here, not for work. Just dinner. Rebecca paused, surprised by the invitation. Like a date? Like a start, he replied simply. And she studied him for a long moment, then nodded. We'd like that. As she walked away to bid farewell to Harold Jenkins, neither of them noticed Diane Cooper watching from the hallway, her expression calculating. Nor did they see her slip into Anderson's office, quickly photographing documents on his desk with her phone before rejoining the party, a smile plastered on her face that didn't reach her eyes. The seeds of the crisis that would soon engulf them all had been quietly sown, invisible beneath the season's celebrations and newfound hope. January arrived with unseasonable warmth, a brief respite from Portland's typically rainy winter. At Veterans Support Services, the new year brought increased activity. Benefit applications spiked after the holidays, as many veterans found themselves struggling with seasonal depression and financial strain. Rebecca had been with the organization for nearly 4 months now, her role expanding beyond administrative work to include direct client support. Veterans requested her by name, appreciating her patient explanations and genuine concern. She had developed a particular skill for helping elderly veterans navigate the bewildering maze of paperwork required for medical benefits. On a bright Tuesday morning, Rebecca arrived to find the office in unusual disarray. Staff members huddled in small groups, conversations stopping abruptly when she approached. Emma, typically cheerful, avoided eye contact when Rebecca greeted her. Is everything okay? Rebecca asked, setting her purse in her desk drawer. Major Anderson wants to see you, Emma replied, her voice unnaturally formal. In his office. Right away. Rebecca's stomach tightened with apprehension. She had never seen the office atmosphere so tense, not even during their busiest crises. She made her way to Anderson's office, knocking lightly on the open door. Anderson sat behind his desk, his posture rigid, expression grim. Beside him stood a man Rebecca didn't recognize. Mid-50s, expensive suit, the polished demeanor of someone accustomed to authority. Rebecca, please come in and close the door, Anderson said, his voice carefully neutral. As she complied, Anderson gestured to the visitor. This is Senator Richard Hayes. He sits on the Veterans Affairs Committee and serves on our board of directors. The senator didn't offer his hand or smile. Ms. Wilson. Rebecca took the seat Anderson indicated, her mind racing through possibilities. Had she made some terrible mistake? Was her position being eliminated? There's been a development I need to discuss with you, Anderson began, his tone measured. Senator Hayes has brought some concerns to my attention regarding our financial operations. The senator interrupted, apparently impatient with Anderson's diplomatic approach. We've received evidence of financial impropriety, Ms. Wilson. Specifically, the misappropriation of funds designated for veterans' services being redirected to private individuals. Rebecca's confusion must have shown on her face because Anderson clarified, there are allegations that I've been using organizational resources to provide benefits to non-veterans. I don't understand, Rebecca said slowly. What does this have to do with me? Senator Hayes leaned forward. Your medical treatments, Ms. Wilson, and your housing arrangement. Neither you nor your daughter are veterans, yet you're receiving services funded by VA grants and private donations specifically earmarked for veterans and their immediate families. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face as understanding dawned. You think I'm taking advantage? The evidence suggests Major Anderson has been diverting funds to support you and your daughter. Given your personal relationship, this represents a serious conflict of interest. Personal relationship? Rebecca echoed, shock giving way to indignation. Major Anderson is my supervisor. He offered me access to programs I qualified for as an employee of this organization. There's nothing improper about that. Senator Hayes raised an eyebrow. The Christmas party. Dinner outings? Your daughter's drawings prominently displayed in his office? The optics, Ms. Wilson, are concerning at best. Rebecca turned to Anderson, expecting him to defend them both, to clarify the misunderstanding. Instead, she found him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Guarded. Assessing. Matthew? She said, using his first name without thinking. Tell him this is ridiculous. Anderson's jaw tightened at her use of his given name in front of the senator. Rebecca, I need you to listen carefully. This investigation is serious. Senator Hayes has received documentation suggesting systematic misuse of funds dating back several months. What documentation? She demanded. Who would even... She stopped as realization struck. Diane. It was Diane, wasn't it? Neither man confirmed or denied, but their silence was answer enough. This is absurd, Rebecca insisted. I followed every proper procedure for the housing program. I pay rent based on the established income scale. My medical treatments are covered by the insurance I receive as an employee, the same insurance everyone else here gets. Senator Hayes' expression remained skeptical. There are records indicating special accommodations were made, exceptions granted, rules bent. Because I'm a good employee who needed help. Rebecca's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. Isn't that what this organization does? Help people? We help veterans, the senator corrected coldly, with limited resources that must be properly allocated according to strict guidelines. Rebecca turned back to Anderson, hurt and confusion evident in her expression. Why aren't you saying anything? You know there was nothing improper about any of this. Anderson met her gaze directly for the first time since she'd entered the office. Rebecca, I need you to take administrative leave while this investigation proceeds. Paid leave, he added quickly, seeing her expression. Just until we sort this out. Administrative leave? The words felt like a betrayal. You're suspending me? It's standard procedure during an internal investigation, he explained, his tone professional, distant. Your position will be waiting for you once this is resolved. Rebecca stood, her legs unsteady beneath her. I have done nothing wrong. Neither have you, as far as I can tell. So why are we being treated like criminals? Senator Hayes answered before Anderson could. Because public perception matters, Ms. Wilson. Veteran Support Services operates on trust. Trust from donors, from the government, from the veterans we serve. Even the appearance of impropriety can damage that trust irreparably. Rebecca gathered her dignity, straightening despite the tremor she could feel building in her hands, the familiar warning sign of stress triggering her condition. How long? She asked Anderson. 2 weeks, initially, with review after that. She nodded stiffly. May I collect my things? Of course. His voice softened slightly. Rebecca, this isn't what I... Don't, she interrupted. Just don't. As she turned to leave, Senator Hayes added, Ms. Wilson, this investigation will necessarily include a review of your housing situation. I recommend you make alternative arrangements. Rebecca froze, her hand on the doorknob. You're evicting us? In the middle of winter? Not immediately, the senator clarified, but the transitional housing program is specifically for veterans. If you're no longer employed by VSS, you won't qualify for the exception that was made. Rebecca didn't trust herself to respond. She left without another word, closing the door with careful control rather than the slam her emotions demanded. The office fell silent as she walked to her desk, aware of colleagues watching while pretending not to. She collected her few personal items, a photo of Emily, a small plant, Harold Jenkins' carved box, and placed them in her purse. Then, with her head held high, she walked out of Veteran Support Services, uncertain if she would ever return. Outside, the January sunshine felt like a mockery of her darkening circumstances. Rebecca made it 2 blocks before the tremors in her hands became unmanageable. She ducked into a small coffee shop, found a corner table, and called Emily's after-school program to arrange early pickup. Then she sat, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Anderson, we need to talk. Not at the office. Can I come by tonight?" She didn't respond. The hurt was too raw, the confusion too complete. She had believed in him, trusted him, even begun to care for him. And in the moment when she needed his support, he had retreated behind a wall of professional detachment. That evening, after picking up Emily and fabricating a story about having a few days off work, Rebecca sat at their small kitchen table reviewing their finances. The reality was grim. Without her job, they had perhaps 6 weeks of savings before true hardship hit. If they lost their subsidized housing as well, that timeline shortened dramatically. A knock at the door interrupted her calculations. Through the peephole, she saw Anderson standing in the hallway, still in his work clothes but with his tie loosened, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Rebecca hesitated, then opened the door without greeting him. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. She stepped aside, gesturing him in but maintaining her silence. "Is Emily asleep?" he asked, glancing toward the bedrooms. Rebecca nodded. "What do you want, Matthew?" He winced at her tone. "To explain? To apologize?" "To fix this. Which one first?" "All of them." He ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture from a man usually so controlled. "Rebecca, I'm sorry for how that meeting went. I should have warned you, prepared you. But Hayes showed up unannounced this morning with those accusations, and I was trying to understand the situation myself." "Understand what situation?" she demanded. "That Diane Cooper has apparently been building a case against us because she thinks there's something inappropriate going on. There isn't. You know that." "I know," he agreed. "But the documentation she provided to Hayes is concerning, not because it shows actual wrongdoing, but because it creates a narrative that could damage the organization." "So you threw me under the bus to protect Veteran Support Services?" "No." The forcefulness of his response seemed to surprise even him. More quietly, he added, "No. I'm trying to protect you, Emily, the organization, and the veterans we serve." "All at once?" Rebecca crossed her arms. "And how exactly does suspending me and threatening our housing protect us?" "The suspension is procedural, not punitive. It keeps you separated from the investigation so there can be no accusations of interference, and I never threatened your housing. That was Hayes overstepping." "Will he follow through?" Anderson hesitated, then admitted, "He could. He has significant influence with the board." Rebecca sank onto the couch, the fight draining out of her. "So, what happens now? We find another apartment we can't afford. I look for another job without a reference because I'm under investigation for, what exactly? Accepting help when I needed it?" Anderson sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "The official investigation centers on whether I misappropriated funds by creating exceptions for you that weren't available to others. But the subtext is clearly about our relationship." "We don't have a relationship," Rebecca said flatly. "We had one dinner, one with Emily." "We have something," Anderson countered gently. "Maybe not a defined relationship, but something neither of us expected. And it frightens people like Hayes who see the world in rigid categories and strict procedures." Rebecca couldn't argue with that assessment. There was something between them, a connection. A mutual understanding, a shared purpose that had been growing steadily since the day Emily walked into his office in a wedding dress. "So, what do we do?" she asked, her anger giving way to exhaustion. "We fight," Anderson said simply. "Properly, strategically, by the book. I've already contacted legal counsel. The allegations are baseless, and we can prove that. But it will take time. Time we don't have," Rebecca pointed out. "My savings won't last more than a month or two, even with paid administrative leave." Anderson seemed to wrestle with himself before saying, "I want to help you financially during this period." "Absolutely not," she said immediately. "That's exactly what got us into this mess." "No, what got us into this mess was Diane Cooper's resentment and Hayes's political ambitions. But I understand your point." He thought for a moment. "What about a formal loan, documented through legal channels? Or I could speak with some of our partner organizations about temporary employment." Before Rebecca could respond, a small voice came from the hallway. "Mom, why is Major Anderson here? Are we in trouble?" Emily stood in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed elephant, her expression worried beyond her years. "No, sweetheart," Rebecca said quickly. "No trouble. Major Anderson just came to talk about some work things." "You should be in bed." Emily approached anyway, climbing onto the couch between them. "You look sad," she told her mother. Then, turning to Anderson, "Did someone make Mom sad?" Anderson looked at the child's serious face and found he couldn't offer her anything but honesty. "Some people misunderstood some things at work, Emily. Your mom and I are trying to fix it." Emily considered this. "Is it because of me? Because I came to your office that day?" "No," both adults said simultaneously. "It's because adults sometimes make things complicated," Rebecca explained, smoothing Emily's hair. "But you don't need to worry about it." "Are you still going to be friends?" Emily persisted, looking between them. Anderson met Rebecca's eyes over the child's head. "I hope so," he said quietly. "I think your mom and you are very important people." Emily nodded as if this confirmed something she already knew. "Mom thinks you're important too." "She smiles different when you call." Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Emily, that's enough. Back to bed, please." After settling Emily back in her room, Rebecca returned to find Anderson standing by the window looking out at the city lights. "She's worried," he said without turning. "Children always know when something's wrong, no matter how we try to shield them." "Yes," Rebecca agreed, remembering how attuned she'd been to her father's moods after Vietnam, how she'd learned to interpret the subtle signs of his good and bad days. Anderson turned to face her. "Rebecca, there's something I haven't told you, something relevant to this situation." Her wariness returned. "What?" "The investigation Hayes is conducting. It's not just about you and me. It's about a pattern of decisions I've made over the past 3 years." "What kind of decisions?" "Exceptions. Workarounds. Creative interpretations of guidelines to help veterans who didn't qualify for official assistance under VA rules." His expression was grim, but unapologetic. Men and women who served their country but fell through bureaucratic cracks because their paperwork wasn't perfect, or their discharge wasn't honorable, or their condition wasn't service-connected according to some arbitrary standard. Understanding dawned. "You've been using organizational funds to help veterans who don't qualify for official benefits." He nodded. "In select cases, where the need was dire and the system had failed them, just like it failed my brother." Rebecca absorbed this revelation. "That's why you didn't defend yourself more forcefully with Hayes, because there is financial impropriety, just not the kind he's focused on." "Yes. And no." Anderson moved closer, his voice lowering despite the fact that they were alone. "Everything I've done has been documented. Every exception approved through proper channels, even if those channels were creatively navigated. I've been building a case, Rebecca, a case against the very system Veterans Support Services operates within. Rebecca stared at him. I don't understand. 3 years of evidence showing how the official guidelines fail the people they're meant to serve. 3 years of documented cases where veterans suffered or died waiting for help they should have received automatically. I've been working with journalists, with advocacy groups, with sympathetic lawmakers. Does Hayes know this? He suspects, which is why he's focusing on you and me instead. A simpler narrative, a personal scandal, rather than a systemic indictment. Anderson's expression hardened. Because if what I've documented becomes public, it implicates people like Hayes who have maintained this broken system for political convenience. Rebecca sat heavily on the couch, trying to process this new dimension. So I'm what? Collateral damage in a larger battle? No, Anderson said firmly, sitting beside her. You're an unintended consequence of choices I made long before I met you. And I'm sorry for that. But I can't abandon the larger mission, not when we're so close to creating real change. What are you planning? In 3 weeks, I'm scheduled to testify before a congressional subcommittee on Veterans Affairs. I'm bringing 3 years of evidence showing systematic failures and their human cost. Hayes is trying to discredit me before that happens. Rebecca's mind raced, connecting dots she hadn't seen before. And my situation, a non-veteran receiving benefits, could be spun as evidence that I'm not a reliable steward of resources. Anderson finished. Yes. So what do you need from me? She asked directly. Anderson looked surprised by the question. Need from you? To make your case, to prevent Hayes from using me against you? What do you need me to do? He studied her face, seeming to reassess something fundamental about her. I would never ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Her voice strengthened with resolve. If what you're doing could help veterans like my father, prevent tragedies like your brother's, then I want to help. Tell me how. Before Anderson could respond, Rebecca's phone rang, an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Miss Wilson, this is Portland General Hospital. We have you listed as the emergency contact for Harold Jenkins? Rebecca's heart sank. Yes, that's right. What's happened? Mr. Jenkins has suffered a cardiac event. He's stable but asking for you. I'll be right there. She hung up, already reaching for her coat. It's Harold. Heart attack. Anderson stood immediately. I'll drive you. What about Emily? Rebecca hesitated, torn between urgency and parental responsibility. Mrs. Patel, Anderson suggested, referencing their neighbor. Would she stay with Emily just until we know Harold's condition? The "we" didn't escape Rebecca's notice. Despite everything, the investigation, their complicated situation, the revelations of the past hour, Anderson's instinct was still to help, to stand beside her rather than retreat to safety. I'll call her, Rebecca decided. She watches Emily sometimes. 20 minutes later, they arrived at Portland General, the same hospital where Rebecca had been treated months earlier. Harold Jenkins lay in a hospital bed, looking smaller and more fragile than Rebecca had ever seen him. His weathered face brightened slightly when he saw her. There she is, he said, his voice weaker but still carrying that distinct Vietnam veteran's gruffness. Told these doctors I wasn't checking out till I saw you. Rebecca took his hand, fighting back tears. You gave us quite a scare, Mr. Jenkins. Harold, he corrected. Told you 100 times to call me Harold. Harold? She amended with a small smile. He noticed Anderson standing behind her. Major, didn't expect to see you here. Couldn't let Rebecca face this alone, Anderson replied simply. Harold's eyes narrowed slightly, glancing between them with surprising shrewdness for a man who had just suffered a heart attack. About time you two figured things out, he muttered. Life's too short for dancing around what matters. Rebecca felt her cheeks warm, but before she could respond, Harold continued, his voice growing urgent. Listen, both of you. There's something you need to know. He gestured them closer. I've been hearing things from some of the old-timers at the VA about an investigation. About you two. We know, Anderson assured him. We're handling it. Harold shook his head. Not just that. It's bigger. Hayes has been blocking veterans' benefits for years, redirecting funds, creating impossible requirements. I served with his father in Vietnam. The man was a coward who got a Purple Heart for shooting himself in the foot, then came home and built a political career on being a war hero. Anderson exchanged a glance with Rebecca. Hayes has been deliberately obstructing benefits? For certain types of veterans, Harold confirmed. Particularly those with mental health claims, PTSD cases, says they're unverifiable and subjective. Like your brother, Rebecca said softly to Anderson. Like my father. Harold's monitoring equipment began beeping more rapidly. A nurse appeared in the doorway. I'm sorry, but Mr. Jenkins needs to rest now. You can come back tomorrow during visiting hours. As they reluctantly prepared to leave, Harold gripped Rebecca's hand with surprising strength. Check my carved box, he whispered. The one I gave you. False bottom. Evidence I've been collecting for years. Rebecca nodded, squeezing his hand in acknowledgement. Rest now. We'll be back tomorrow. In the hospital corridor, Rebecca and Anderson stood in stunned silence, processing Harold's revelations. If what he says is true, Anderson began, it would explain why Hayes is so determined to discredit you before your testimony, Rebecca finished. This isn't just about protecting the system, it's about protecting himself. Their eyes met, mutual understanding passing between them. Whatever personal complications existed in their relationship, whatever professional challenges they faced, this was something larger, a chance to correct a systemic injustice that had claimed too many lives. We need to see what's in that box, Anderson said. Rebecca nodded. And I need to get back to Emily, but tomorrow we start fighting back, Anderson completed her thought. Together. As they walked toward the exit, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text. She checked it, then stopped abruptly, color draining from her face. Rebecca? What is it? She turned the phone so he could see the message from Mrs. Patel. Man came looking for Emily, said he was her father. Something felt wrong, so I didn't open door. He left but seemed angry. Should I call police? Anderson's expression hardened. Call Mrs. Patel. Tell her we're on our way and to keep the doors locked. I'm calling Portland PD now. The crisis had just escalated beyond anything either of them could have anticipated, their personal and professional challenges suddenly overshadowed by a more immediate threat to the little girl who had brought them together in the first place. Anderson drove with controlled urgency, his military training evident in his precise movements and focused calm. Rebecca sat beside him, repeatedly calling Mrs. Patel's phone, which now went straight to voicemail. Why isn't she answering? Rebecca's voice cracked with panic. She always answers. Try not to assume the worst, Anderson advised, though his white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel betrayed his own concern. The police are already on their way. The 15-minute drive felt endless. Rebecca's mind raced through terrible possibilities. Jack Wilson had been out of their lives for 6 years, appearing only as a signature on divorce papers and occasional missed child support checks. Why would he suddenly appear now, demanding to see Emily? As they pulled up to the apartment building, 2 police cruisers were already parked outside, lights flashing silently in the night. A small crowd of curious neighbors had gathered despite the late hour. Rebecca was out of the car before Anderson had fully stopped, racing toward the building entrance where an officer stood talking to Mrs. Patel. The elderly woman looked shaken but unharmed. "Rebecca!" Mrs. Patel exclaimed. "Thank God you're here!" "Where's Emily? Is she okay?" Rebecca demanded. She's fine, Mrs. Patel assured her. Still sleeping. I never left her alone, not for a minute. Rebecca sagged with relief. The officer, a middle-aged woman with a kind but professional demeanor, turned to her. Ms. Wilson? I'm Officer Martinez. Can we speak privately about this situation? Rebecca nodded, then glanced at Anderson, who had joined them. This is Matthew Anderson. He's my... She hesitated, unsure how to define him in this moment. He's a friend. He can hear anything you have to say. Officer Martinez gestured toward a quieter corner of the lobby. Mrs. Patel reported a man claiming to be your daughter's father attempted to gain access to your apartment approximately 40 minutes ago. When denied entry, he became agitated and made concerning statements. What kind of statements? Anderson asked, his voice level. According to Mrs. Patel, he said something to the effect of, "She's my kid too, and I have rights." Officer Martinez consulted her notes. When informed that he would need to return when you were home, he allegedly stated, "Rebecca doesn't get to keep my daughter from me anymore." Rebecca's stomach clenched. Jack has never been part of Emily's life. He left before she was born. He's never even met her. Is there a custody agreement in place? The officer asked. No formal agreement. The divorce decree gives me full custody. Jack didn't contest it. Rebecca ran a trembling hand through her hair. I don't understand. Why now? After 6 years? Anderson placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. Is there any reason he might suddenly take an interest? Has anything changed recently? Rebecca's mind flashed to the publicity surrounding Veterans Support Service's upcoming congressional testimony, the local newspaper article featuring Anderson with a mention of Rebecca as a key staff member. There was a piece in the Oregonian last month, she said slowly, about veterans advocacy. I was mentioned, and it said where I worked, but that seems far-fetched. Not necessarily, Anderson replied grimly. If Jack's been in Portland all this time, he might have seen it. Officer Martinez made a note. We'll need the full name and any information you have on your ex-husband. We can have officers keep an eye on the building tonight, but without an explicit threat or restraining order, our options are limited. As they spoke, the elevator doors opened and Emily emerged in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Mrs. Patel followed, looking apologetic. I'm sorry, she woke up and insisted on finding you, the elderly woman explained. Mom? Emily's voice was small, uncertain. Why are there police cars outside? Rebecca quickly crossed to her daughter, kneeling to her level. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just a little mix-up. These officers are making sure everyone in the building is safe. Emily's gaze moved past her mother to Anderson, then to Officer Martinez. Her perceptive eyes narrowed slightly, clearly not believing the simplified explanation. Is it because of the man who was yelling? The adults exchanged alarmed glances. You heard someone yelling? Rebecca asked carefully. Emily nodded. I woke up and heard a man saying my name really loud. He said, I know Emily's in there. And Mrs. Patel told him to go away. She frowned, processing the memory. He sounded angry. Was he a bad person? Rebecca pulled Emily into a tight hug, momentarily unable to speak. Over her daughter's head she met Anderson's eyes, seeing in them a mirror of her own concern. Officer Martinez approached, crouching down to Emily's level. You're a very observant young lady, Emily. Did you see this man at all? Emily shook her head. Mrs. Patel wouldn't let me near the door. She said it wasn't safe. That was very smart of Mrs. Patel, the officer agreed, and you were very brave to stay quiet and listen to her. After taking detailed statements and arranging for a patrol car to monitor the building overnight, Officer Martinez prepared to leave. We'll try to locate Mr. Wilson for questioning. In the meantime, I'd recommend staying with friends or family if possible, just as a precaution. When the police had gone and Mrs. Patel had returned to her apartment with profuse thanks from Rebecca, The three of them, Rebecca, Anderson, and Emily, stood in the small living room, the night's events hanging heavy around them. "I don't want to stay here tonight," Emily said quietly, clutching her stuffed elephant tighter. Rebecca nodded, understanding her daughter's fear but uncertain where they could go. Her modest salary hadn't allowed for savings beyond bare necessities, and most of her friends were in similar financial situations. Small apartments, tight budgets, no spare rooms. "You could come to my place," Anderson offered. "I have a guest room." Rebecca hesitated, weighing their limited options against the potential complications of staying with Anderson. "I don't know if that's a good idea, given the investigation." "The investigation is about financial impropriety, not personal relationships," he pointed out. "And right now, Emily's safety is the priority." Looking at her daughter's worried face, Rebecca made her decision. "Okay, just for tonight. Let me pack a few things." Anderson's home was a surprise, not the sparse bachelor apartment Rebecca had unconsciously expected, but a modest craftsman house in a quiet northeast Portland neighborhood. Inside, the furnishings were simple but warm, with built-in bookshelves, hardwood floors, and framed photographs that spoke of military service and family connections. "It was my grandparents' house," Anderson explained as he showed them to the guest room. "I inherited it after my brother died. He was living here while I was deployed." The guest room was clearly designed for a child. Airplane models hung from the ceiling, and a twin bed with a blue comforter sat beneath a window. "This was Thomas's room when he was a boy," Anderson said quietly. "And then his son's room when they stayed here." "Your brother had a child?" Rebecca asked, surprised by this previously unmentioned detail. Anderson nodded, his expression softening with memory. "Michael. He lives with his mother in California now. He's 12. Emily explored the room with curious reverence, carefully touching the model airplanes. "Can I sleep here, Mom?" "If that's okay with Major Anderson," Rebecca replied. "Of course," he said. "And Emily, when we're not at the office, you can call me Matthew." Emily tested the name silently, then nodded with the solemn acceptance only children can manage. "Matthew," she repeated. "That's a good name." After settling Emily into bed with reassurances that she was safe and protected, Rebecca joined Anderson in the kitchen where he had made tea. They sat at the small table, the events of the day catching up with them in a wave of exhaustion. "Thank you," Rebecca said simply. "For everything today?" Anderson shook his head slightly. "No thanks necessary. I'm just glad you're both safe." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, sipping their tea. Then Rebecca asked the question that had been lingering since the hospital. "Do you think Harold was right about Hayes deliberately blocking veterans' benefits?" Anderson's expression darkened. "It would explain a lot. The patterns I've documented show clear bias against certain types of claims, particularly PTSD and traumatic brain injuries, conditions that can be more difficult to objectively measure." "Like my father's," Rebecca said quietly. "And your brother's." "Exactly. And if Hayes has been influencing these decisions for political reasons—" He trailed off, the implications too disturbing to voice fully. "We need to see what's in Harold's box," Rebecca concluded. "First thing tomorrow." Anderson nodded, then shifted topics with visible reluctance. "About Jack Wilson. Has he tried to contact you before this?" Rebecca stared into her tea. "Not for years. The last time was when Emily was 2. He called, drunk, saying he'd made a mistake and wanted to see her. I told him he'd need to establish child support and regular visitation, not just appear when the mood struck. He hung up and never called again. And now he shows up unannounced, demanding access to her." Anderson's jaw tightened. "The timing seems suspicious, especially with everything else happening." "You think it's connected to Hayes and the investigation?" Rebecca looked skeptical. "That seems paranoid." "Perhaps," Anderson conceded. But my military experience taught me to be wary of coincidences. Rebecca rubbed her temples, feeling the beginnings of a stress headache. It's too much. First the investigation, then Harold's heart attack, now Jack. How are we supposed to fight on all these fronts at once? We prioritize, Anderson replied, military strategy evident in his approach. Emily's safety comes first, then Harold's information about Hayes. The investigation is actually our lowest priority right now. Easy to say when it's not your job and housing on the line, Rebecca remarked, more sharply than she intended. Anderson didn't take offense. You're right. I should have said the investigation is the least urgent threat, not the least important. I'm fully committed to clearing your name and restoring your position. Rebecca sighed, regretting her tone. I know you are. I'm sorry. I'm just... She gestured vaguely, words failing to encompass the storm of emotions she was experiencing. Scared? Angry? Overwhelmed? Anderson supplied the words matter-of-factly. All reasonable responses to unreasonable circumstances. She smiled slightly at his assessment. Very clinical, Major. Military habit, he admitted. Break problems down, address components individually, maintain emotional distance. His expression softened. Though the last part has become increasingly difficult where you and Emily are concerned. The simple admission hung between them, neither entirely ready to explore its implications, but both acknowledging its truth. We should get some rest, Rebecca finally said. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without sleep deprivation. Anderson nodded, standing to clear their mugs. Take my room. I'll sleep on the couch. I couldn't. It's not negotiable, he interrupted gently. You need proper rest more than I do. Rebecca wanted to argue, but found she lacked the energy. Her condition often worsened with stress, and today had delivered that in abundance. Already she could feel the familiar ache in her joints, the prelude to what would likely be a difficult morning. Thank you, she conceded, but just for tonight. Morning arrived with unexpected clarity, sunshine streaming through windows despite Portland's typical January gloom. Rebecca woke disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings until memory returned in a rush. The investigation, Harold's heart attack, Jack's appearance, Emily. She rose quickly, wincing at the stiffness in her joints, and moved to check on her daughter. The guest room was empty, the bed neatly made. Momentary panic gave way to relief when she heard Emily's unmistakable giggle from downstairs. In the kitchen, she found an unexpected domestic scene. Emily perched on a stool at the counter, helping Anderson make pancakes. Her daughter wore an oversized apron tied twice around her small frame, her face alight with concentration as she carefully measured blueberries into the batter. "Mom!" Emily exclaimed when she noticed Rebecca. "Matthew is teaching me how to make real pancakes, not the kind from the box." Anderson looked up, a hint of self-consciousness crossing his usually composed features. "Good morning." "Hope we didn't wake you." "No, not at all." Rebecca was struck by the tableau. Her daughter and this man she barely knew yet somehow trusted implicitly, engaged in such an ordinary, peaceful activity amidst the chaos surrounding them. "Coffee?" Anderson offered, gesturing to a fresh pot. "Please." As Anderson poured her coffee, his phone rang. He checked the screen, his expression turning serious. "It's the hospital." Rebecca's heart sank, her mind immediately jumping to Harold Jenkins. Anderson answered, his responses brief and controlled, but his face revealed growing concern. "We'll be right there," he concluded, ending the call. He turned to Rebecca. "Harold's condition has worsened overnight. They're asking for us to come in." Rebecca nodded, already calculating logistics. "Emily has school." "I don't want to go to school," Emily interrupted, fear evident in her voice. "What if that man comes looking for me there?" It was a valid concern, one Rebecca had already considered. "Sweetheart, we can't keep you home forever, but maybe just for today, until we figure things out. She could come with us to the hospital," Anderson suggested. "Harold would probably appreciate seeing her." Emily brightened at this idea. "Can I bring Mr. Harold my drawing? The one of the chess pieces?" "I think he'd like that very much," Rebecca agreed, grateful for Anderson's solution. They arrived at Portland General 40 minutes later, having stopped briefly at Rebecca's apartment to collect Emily's drawing and check for any signs of disturbance. There were none. The pediatric ward had a supervised playroom where Emily could stay while they visited Harold, whose condition prohibited young visitors. Harold Jenkins looked markedly worse than the previous night. His skin had a grayish tinge, and the array of monitors surrounding his bed had multiplied. Despite this, his eyes brightened when he saw them. "Took you long enough," he grumbled, though the effect was undermined by the obvious effort it cost him to speak. "We came as soon as they called," Rebecca assured him, taking his weathered hand in hers. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been run over by the same tank twice," he replied with gallows humor. "Doctors say I had another episode during the night. Smaller, but didn't help matters." Anderson stood at the foot of the bed, his posture reflecting the military respect ingrained through years of service. "What's the prognosis?" Harold's expression turned grim. "Bypass surgery tomorrow. 50-50 odds, give or take. At my age, with my ticker, those aren't betting odds I'd take." Rebecca squeezed his hand. "You're strong, Harold. You've survived worse." "Maybe." He glanced between them, his shrewd gaze still sharp despite his condition. "Did you check the box?" Rebecca shook her head. "Not yet. We had some complications last night." She briefly explained Jack's appearance and their temporary relocation to Anderson's home. Harold listened intently, his expression darkening. "Convenient timing, your ex showing up now." "Too convenient." "That's what I said," Anderson agreed. "The timing correlates too closely with the investigation and Rebecca's suspension." "Not just coincidence," Harold insisted, his breathing becoming more labored with agitation. "Connection. Hayes has fingers everywhere. Military contracts, veterans organizations, political campaigns." Rebecca and Anderson exchanged concerned glances. Harold's heart monitor was showing increased activity. "Harold, you need to stay calm," Rebecca urged. "Whatever's in the box, we'll figure it out, but you need to focus on getting through surgery first." The elderly veteran shook his head stubbornly. "Might not be a first for me, girl." "Need you to understand what you're up against." He gripped her hand with surprising strength. "The box contains records, dates, names, decisions, veterans denied benefits they earned, some who died waiting, and Hayes's fingerprints all over the denials." "How did you get this information?" Anderson asked, professional interest overriding his concern momentarily. "Been collecting for years. Got friends in VA offices in Congress. A lot of us Vietnam vets ended up in government trying to change things from inside." Harold's voice weakened, his energy clearly fading. "Evidence points to Hayes redirecting funds, veterans' benefits going to private contractors, campaign donors." Rebecca's mind raced, connecting this new information with Anderson's upcoming testimony. This could corroborate Matthew's findings, show that the problem isn't just bureaucratic inefficiency, but deliberate obstruction. Harold nodded, then winced as pain crossed his features. A nurse appeared in the doorway, alerted by the monitors. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Jenkins needs to rest now," she said firmly. "You can come back after his procedure tomorrow." "We'll be here," Rebecca promised, squeezing Harold's hand one last time. "And we'll check the box today." As they left the cardiac unit, both lost in thought about Harold's revelations, Rebecca's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello?" "Ms. Wilson, this is Principal Mercer from Eastwood Elementary. I'm calling about Emily." Rebecca froze, confusion evident on her face. "Emily isn't at school today. She's with me." There was a pause on the other end. "That's strange. We received a call this morning from a man identifying himself as Emily's father. He said Emily would be absent today because she was spending the day with him. He seemed to have all the necessary information. Your address, Emily's student ID number." Cold fear washed over Rebecca. "I never called. Emily's father is not in her life. He has no authorization to contact the school." Anderson, seeing her distress, moved closer. Rebecca put the phone on speaker so he could hear. "I see," the principal replied, concern evident in her voice. "In that case, I should inform you that this man came to the school about 30 minutes ago asking to collect Emily's homework. When told she wasn't marked absent in our system, he became agitated and left." "Did he give a name?" Anderson asked. "Yes, Jack Wilson. Our records do list him as the biological father, though with a note that all communications should go through Ms. Wilson only. Please alert your security," Anderson said authoritatively. "This man should not be allowed on school grounds or given any information about Emily. We've already filed a police report about his behavior." After ending the call, Rebecca leaned against the wall, struggling to process this new development. "He went to her school. He has her student ID number. How is that possible?" "Someone gave him access to information he shouldn't have," Anderson replied, his expression grim. "This isn't random, Rebecca. Jack is being used as a tool to destabilize you, and by extension, me." "But why? What could Jack possibly gain from this?" "That's what we need to find out." Anderson checked his watch. "We should get back to Emily, then retrieve Harold's box. If the evidence is as significant as he suggests, it could explain why Hayes is so desperate to discredit us." As they walked toward the pediatric ward, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text message. She checked it, then stopped abruptly, color draining from her face. "Rebecca, what is it?" She turned the phone so Anderson could see the message from an unknown number. "I know where you and my daughter are staying. Marine's house won't protect you. Time to talk about custody arrangements." Anderson's expression hardened. "Call the police." "I'll get Emily." But as they rounded the corner to the pediatric ward, they found the playroom in commotion. A nurse was speaking urgently with security guards while children were being ushered back to their rooms. "What's happening?" Rebecca demanded, panic rising in her throat. The nurse turned, recognizing them. "Ms. Wilson, there was a man here asking for Emily about 10 minutes ago. When told only authorized adults could visit, he became belligerent. Security escorted him out, but we've moved all the children as a precaution." "Where's Emily now?" Anderson asked, his military bearing fully present. "Safe in the supervisor's office," the nurse assured them. "She's quite upset, though. She saw the man and heard him claiming to be her father." Rebecca pushed past them, racing toward the administrative area with Anderson close behind. They found Emily huddled in a chair, tears streaming down her face, a social worker attempting to comfort her. "Mom!" Emily cried, launching herself into Rebecca's arms. Rebecca held her daughter tightly, her own tears threatening. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. I'm here." Over Emily's head, she met Anderson's eyes, seeing in them a reflection of her own fear and determination. Jack's behavior had escalated from concerning to threatening, and Harold's condition had worsened dramatically. The investigation into veteran support services now seemed like the least of their problems. Yet somehow, Rebecca was certain all these crises were connected, threads in a complex web they were only beginning to understand. As hospital security and then police officers took statements and reviewed surveillance footage, Rebecca held Emily close, A terrible realization settling in her heart. Their lives had become collateral damage in a larger, more dangerous game, one whose rules and players remained frustratingly obscure. Police officer Martinez arrived at the hospital within 30 minutes of Rebecca's call, her expression grave as she reviewed the surveillance footage showing Jack Wilson attempting to access the pediatric ward. The man on the screen was in his mid-30s, with military short hair and the tense posture of someone perpetually ready for conflict. "That's definitely him," Rebecca confirmed, keeping her voice low to avoid disturbing Emily, who sat nearby with a hospital counselor. "That's Jack." Officer Martinez nodded, making notes. "Based on his escalating behavior, we have enough for a temporary restraining order. I'll need you to come to the station to complete the paperwork." Anderson, who had been conferring with hospital security, rejoined them. "Officer, given the circumstances, would it be possible to complete that paperwork here? Ms. Wilson is understandably reluctant to leave her daughter right now." The officer considered this, then nodded. "I can have the forms brought here. In the meantime, I've put out an APB for Mr. Wilson. We'll bring him in for questioning when located." Rebecca thanked her, relief mingling with continued anxiety. A restraining order was a step toward safety, but paper protections meant little against someone determined to violate them. "There's something else you should know," Anderson said, his voice pitched for Officer Martinez's ears only. "We have reason to believe Mr. Wilson's sudden reappearance may be connected to an ongoing federal investigation involving Senator Richard Hayes." The officer's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's a significant allegation, Major Anderson." "I'm aware," he replied. "And while I can't share all the details yet, I can tell you that both Ms. Wilson and I have recently been targeted professionally in what appears to be an attempt to discredit us before I testify before Congress next week." Officer Martinez absorbed this information, her expression thoughtful. "I'll make a note of the potential connection in my report, though without evidence we'll still treat this as a straightforward custody dispute escalation." "Of course," Anderson agreed. "We just wanted it on record." After the officer left to arrange for the restraining order paperwork, Rebecca and Anderson sat with Emily, who had finally stopped crying but remained unnaturally quiet, her usual brightness dimmed by fear. "He was scary," Emily whispered, leaning against her mother. "He kept saying he was my dad, but dads are supposed to be nice. He wasn't nice." Rebecca stroked her daughter's hair, at a loss for how to explain the complexities of the situation to a 6-year-old. "Sometimes people get confused about the right way to act, sweetheart. But you're safe now. The police are going to make sure he can't bother us again." Anderson, who had been watching this exchange with a pained expression, knelt to Emily's level. "Emily, I want you to know something important. What happened today wasn't your fault. None of this is your fault." The little girl looked at him, her blue eyes serious. "Is it because I went to your office that day? In Mom's dress? Did I make the bad things happen?" "No," both adults said simultaneously, with such vehemence that Emily blinked in surprise. "Absolutely not," Anderson continued more gently. "You did something brave and kind that day. These problems would have happened anyway. But without you, your mom and I wouldn't have become friends. And friends help each other through hard times." This simple explanation seemed to satisfy Emily, who nodded thoughtfully. "Like how Mr. Harold is our friend too?" "Exactly like that," Rebecca confirmed. "And speaking of Mr. Harold, we need to check something at home. Something important he gave me." After completing the restraining order paperwork and receiving assurances from Officer Martinez that patrol cars would monitor both the hospital and Anderson's home, they made their way to Rebecca's apartment to retrieve Harold's carved box. Anderson insisted on entering the apartment first, his military training evident in the systematic way he checked each room before allowing Rebecca and Emily inside. The apartment appeared undisturbed, but Rebecca couldn't shake a sense of vulnerability. the feeling that their private space had been compromised by Jack's knowledge of their whereabouts. "There it is," she said, pointing to Harold's wooden box sitting on her desk. The craftsmanship was evident in the intricate carvings depicting forest scenes, a therapeutic project from Harold's PTSD recovery decades earlier. Rebecca brought the box to the kitchen table, examining it carefully. "He said there's a false bottom," she murmured, running her fingers along the edges. Anderson studied it, then pressed a small knot in the wood grain. With a soft click, the bottom panel loosened. "Military trick," he explained, seeing Rebecca's surprised expression. "Many Vietnam veterans created hiding places in everyday items, a habit carried over from the war." Inside the hidden compartment lay a USB drive and a handwritten letter addressed to Rebecca. She opened it with trembling fingers, recognizing Harold's spidery handwriting. "Rebecca," she read aloud, "if you're reading this, either I've finally worked up the courage to show you what I've been collecting, or something's happened to me. I hope it's the former, but I'm an old man with a worn-out heart, so I've prepared for the latter." She paused, emotion tightening her throat, then continued. "For 10 years, I've been gathering evidence on how veterans like me, especially those with PTSD, TBI, and other invisible wounds, have been systematically denied benefits. It started as a personal mission after my buddy Mike took his life in 2013 when his claims were repeatedly rejected. But what I found goes beyond bureaucratic indifference. This is deliberate policy, orchestrated by people with names and faces who should know better." Anderson's expression darkened as Rebecca read, his jaw tight with controlled anger. "Senator Hayes chairs the committee that could fix this, but has instead made it worse. The data on this drive shows a clear pattern. Veterans from certain units, with certain types of injuries, or who served in certain operations have their claims flagged for special review, a euphemism for indefinite delay. Many die waiting. Others give up. Either way, money allocated by Congress for veteran care gets redirected to private contractors and research projects connected to Hayes's donors." Rebecca looked up, meeting Anderson's gaze. "This is what you've been documenting too, isn't it?" He nodded grimly. "From a different angle, but yes. The patterns are unmistakable once you know what to look for." She returned to the letter. "I'm not the only one who knows. There's a network of us, veterans, VA employees, congressional staffers, gathering evidence. Your boss, Anderson, is part of it. His brother Thomas was denied proper care despite clear service-connected PTSD. Like my buddy Mike, he chose a permanent solution to what should have been a temporary problem." Rebecca paused, glancing at Anderson. His expression remained stoic, but pain flickered in his eyes at the mention of his brother. "What makes this evidence particularly damning is the connection to private healthcare companies that profit from VA outsourcing. Hayes's family trust owns significant stock in these companies. Every denied veteran who gives up and every delayed claim that ends with a death represents more money flowing to private care, and by extension, to Hayes." "My God," Rebecca whispered, the implication settling heavily. "This is why he's so desperate to discredit you before your testimony." Anderson nodded. "If this evidence were presented alongside my own findings, it would be nearly impossible to dismiss as coincidence or bureaucratic inefficiency." Rebecca continued reading, her voice growing stronger as the letter's importance became clearer. "Rebecca, I'm sharing this with you because I've watched you these past months. You care about these old warriors like we're your own family. And because your father, James Wilson, was one of us, 101st Airborne, 2 tours, came home changed like we all did. His claim for PTSD treatment was among those mysteriously delayed. I found his file in the data. "We need to see what's on this drive," she said firmly. Anderson nodded, glancing at Emily, who had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted by the day's emotional strain. "Not here, though. If Hayes has indeed enlisted Jack to disrupt our lives, this apartment isn't secure." "Back to your place?" Rebecca suggested. "For now," he agreed. "But we may need somewhere more secure if what's on this drive is as significant as Harold suggests." As they prepared to leave, gathering essentials for another night away, Rebecca's phone rang. The hospital again. "Miss Wilson? This is Dr. Patel from cardiology. I'm calling about Harold Jenkins." Rebecca's heart sank at the doctor's tone. "What's happened?" "Mr. Jenkins suffered a major cardiac arrest 30 minutes ago. We were able to resuscitate him, but his condition is now critical. We're moving forward with emergency surgery, rather than waiting until tomorrow." "We'll come right away," Rebecca said immediately. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," the doctor replied, regret evident in his voice. "He'll be in surgery for at least 6 hours, and then in recovery. The earliest you could see him would be tomorrow morning, and that's assuming the procedure is successful." The unspoken alternative hung in the air between them. "Please," Rebecca said, her voice breaking slightly. "Tell him we're thinking of him. Tell him we have the box, and we understand what needs to be done." After ending the call, she turned to Anderson, who had been listening intently. "Harold's in emergency surgery. It doesn't sound good." Anderson's expression tightened with concern. "All the more reason to secure this evidence and determine our next steps. Harold has entrusted us with something important. We need to honor that trust." Rebecca nodded, gathering Emily's sleeping form into her arms. "Let's go." Back at Anderson's house, they established a makeshift command center at the dining room table. While Emily continued sleeping on the living room couch, they connected the USB drive to Anderson's laptop using the password Harold had provided in his letter. The drive contained hundreds of files, spreadsheets, PDFs, email screenshots, all meticulously organized and annotated. Harold's attention to detail was impressive. Each piece of evidence was labeled with date, source, and significance. "Look at this," Anderson said, opening a spreadsheet titled Claim Denial Patterns. He's tracked over 2,000 cases of veterans with PTSD or TBI claims that were delayed or denied over the past decade. The correlation with certain units and deployment locations is unmistakable. Rebecca studied the data, her background in English making her less comfortable with statistical analysis but no less able to recognize the disturbing patterns. These notes indicate many of these veterans had identical diagnoses to others whose claims were approved. The only difference was their unit assignment or the specific operation they participated in. "Classified operations," Anderson explained grimly. "The VA examiners wouldn't have security clearance to verify service-connected trauma from classified missions. Hayes exploited that loophole to flag these claims for additional review, effectively placing them in permanent limbo. They worked methodically through the files, the evidence building a damning case against not just Hayes, but an entire system designed to prioritize financial interests over veterans' well-being. It was nearly midnight when they discovered the file that changed everything, a folder labeled simply Wilson. "Rebecca," Anderson said quietly, "I think you should see this." Inside were documents related to her father's VA claims and medical records, all showing a clear pattern of deliberate delays and denials, despite multiple diagnoses of severe PTSD from combat trauma. Most disturbing was an internal memo from Hayes's office explicitly directing that James Wilson's case be held for further review, despite meeting all criteria for immediate approval. "He targeted my father specifically," Rebecca whispered, shock giving way to cold anger. "But why? What could Hayes possibly have against my father?" Anderson opened another document in the folder, a military incident report from Vietnam. I think this might explain it. Your father was platoon leader during an operation where Hayes's father was injured. According to this report, the elder Hayes received a Purple Heart for wounds sustained during enemy contact. That matches what Harold told us at the hospital, Rebecca noted. He said Hayes's father received a medal for shooting himself in the foot, then built a political career on being a war hero. This report contains statements from multiple witnesses, including your father, Anderson continued, scanning the document. They all indicate that Robert Hayes's injury was self-inflicted, either accidental or deliberate, not the result of enemy action. So my father knew the truth about Hayes's father, Rebecca said, the pieces falling into place. And decades later, when my father needed help, Hayes made sure he didn't get it. A decades-long vendetta carried out through bureaucratic means, Anderson confirmed grimly. And Harold recognized the connection when he saw your name and started working at Veterans Support Services. Rebecca sat back, overwhelmed by the personal dimension of what had begun as a professional crisis. This is why Harold gave me the box. Not just because I care about veterans, but because my father was one of Hayes's victims. And now Hayes is targeting you, using Jack to apply pressure from another direction. Anderson's expression hardened. The timing of Jack's sudden interest in Emily can't be coincidental. Rebecca's blood ran cold as she considered the implications. You think Hayes contacted Jack? Encouraged him to pursue custody as a way to distract us from the investigation and your testimony? It would be consistent with his methods, Anderson replied. Indirect pressure, plausible deniability, maximum disruption. A new thought struck Rebecca with terrible clarity. What if there's more to it? Jack was never interested in Emily before. Why now? She began searching through the files, looking for any connection between Jack Wilson and Senator Hayes. Anderson joined the search, his methodical approach complementing Rebecca's intuitive leaps. Together, they discovered a small but significant link. Jack Wilson's current employer, a private security firm called Centurion Defense, had received multiple contracts from committees Hayes chaired or influenced. This could be the connection, Anderson said. Hayes reaches out to Centurion, identifies Jack as someone with leverage over you, and suggests it might be in the company's interest if Jack suddenly developed paternal instincts. Rebecca nodded slowly, the scenario fitting the pattern of indirect influence they'd seen throughout Hayes's operations. But why go to such lengths? Your testimony is important, but is it really that threatening? By itself, perhaps not, Anderson admitted. But combined with Harold's evidence and the network he's built, yes, it could end Hayes's career and possibly lead to criminal charges. As they continued piecing together the complex web of connections, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a notification. She checked it, then inhaled sharply. What is it? Anderson asked, immediately alert. An email from the hospital administrator, she replied, her voice tight with concern. They're requiring payment for Emily's doctor visit last month. They're saying our insurance was terminated retroactively from the date of my suspension. Anderson's expression darkened. That's not possible. The terms of your administrative leave explicitly included continued benefits. Well, someone changed those terms, Rebecca said, showing him the email detailing the insurance rejection. And I'm guessing it wasn't an administrative error. Hayes again, Anderson concluded. Another pressure point. Rebecca ran a hand through her hair, frustration mounting. How are we supposed to fight this? He's a United States Senator with seemingly unlimited resources and influence. We're, what, a suspended administrative assistant and a veterans advocate under investigation? We're more than that, Anderson corrected firmly. We're the people with the evidence. And we're not alone. He opened Harold's contact list, names and information for others in the network investigating Hayes's activities. These people have been gathering evidence for years, each seeing a piece of the puzzle. Harold has connected all those pieces. But how do we reach them safely? If Hayes has gone to these lengths already, he's obviously monitoring our communications. Anderson considered this, military strategy evident in his approach. We need secure channels and a safe location to coordinate, and we need to move quickly. My testimony is scheduled for Tuesday, just 4 days from now. A soft sound from the living room interrupted their planning. Emily stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "Mom, I had a bad dream." Rebecca immediately went to her daughter, kneeling to embrace her. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe." "I dreamed that man found us," Emily whispered, clinging to her mother. "He was trying to take me away." Rebecca held her tighter, meeting Anderson's gaze over Emily's head. The unspoken agreement passed between them. Emily's safety took precedence over everything else. "I think we need to get Emily somewhere secure," Anderson said quietly. "Somewhere Hayes and Jack won't think to look." Rebecca nodded, the decision crystallizing with absolute clarity. "I know where, but we'll need help getting there without being followed." As they began making arrangements, Anderson's phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He answered cautiously, putting the call on speaker. "Major Anderson, this is Dr. Patel from Portland General." The doctor's voice was solemn. "I'm calling about Harold Jenkins. He made it through surgery, but there were complications. He's on life support, and frankly, his prognosis is not good." Rebecca closed her eyes briefly, grief washing over her face. "Before he went into surgery," the doctor continued, "he was adamant about leaving a message for you and Ms. Wilson. He said, 'Tell them Jack is not Emily's father. Check the birth certificate. Grace is the key.'" Anderson and Rebecca exchanged startled glances, the cryptic message hanging between them. "Did that mean anything to you?" Dr. Patel asked. He was quite insistent. "Yes," Anderson replied slowly, though in truth the message had only deepened the mystery. "Thank you, Doctor. We'll be there first thing tomorrow." After ending the call, they sat in stunned silence, Harold's message replaying in their minds. "Jack is not Emily's father," Rebecca repeated. "That's impossible. We were married when she was born. His name is on her birth certificate." "Are you certain?" Anderson asked gently. "Have you looked at the actual certificate recently?" Rebecca hesitated, then shook her head. "Not for years. It's in her documents, in the fireproof box in my closet." "And who is Grace?" Anderson pressed. "Harold said Grace is the key. I don't know anyone named—" Rebecca stopped abruptly, her face paling. "Grace? My sister, Grace." "You have a sister?" "Had," Rebecca corrected, her voice hollow. "She died 8 years ago, drug overdose. We weren't close. She struggled with addiction for years after our father died." Her eyes widened with sudden realization. "She disappeared for almost a year before she died, around the time I was pregnant with Emily." Anderson watched understanding dawn on Rebecca's face, followed by shock, then a complex mix of emotions too intertwined to name. "We need to see that birth certificate," he said quietly. Rebecca nodded, her world shifting beneath her feet. "Yes. We need to know the truth, all of it, before we can protect Emily from what's coming." As they prepared to return to Rebecca's apartment to retrieve the vital document, both understood that whatever they discovered would fundamentally alter not just their strategy against Hayes, but the very foundation of their lives. The truth Harold had guarded was about to be revealed, and with it, perhaps, a new understanding of the little girl who had brought them together with her brave journey in a wedding dress. 6 months later, the garden behind Anderson's Craftsman house bloomed with early summer flowers. Emily knelt in the freshly turned soil, carefully planting marigold seedlings under Harold Jenkins's watchful eye. The elderly veteran sat in his wheelchair, offering guidance with the patience of someone who had discovered the healing power of growing things decades earlier. "Not too deep now," Harold advised, his voice stronger than it had been in the hospital, but still carrying the rasp of someone who had narrowly escaped death. "Marigolds like to keep their heads in the sun, and just their toes in the dirt." Emily nodded seriously, adjusting her planting technique. "Like this, Mr. Harold?" "Perfect," he affirmed, his weathered face crinkling with pleasure. "You've got a natural green thumb, just like your Aunt Grace did." At the mention of her biological mother, Emily's expression shifted to thoughtful curiosity. Not sadness or confusion, but the contemplative look of a child gradually integrating a complex truth into her understanding of the world. From the kitchen window, Rebecca watched this interaction, a cup of coffee warming her hands despite the mild June day. The past 6 months had transformed their lives in ways she could never have imagined that January night when they discovered the truth hidden in Emily's birth certificate. Grace Wilson was listed as the mother, Rebecca Wilson as the legal guardian with adoption pending. No father named. The document had confirmed what Harold's cryptic message suggested and what Rebecca had begun to suspect. Emily was her niece, not her daughter. Grace, in one of her brief periods of sobriety, had entrusted her baby to Rebecca before disappearing again into addiction. The official adoption had been completed just weeks before Grace's overdose. Rebecca had maintained the fiction that Emily was her daughter, even with Jack, who had been content to sign away rights to a child he'd never wanted. It had seemed simpler, cleaner. A fresh start for a baby who deserved better than the chaos of Grace's life. Now, watching Emily with Harold, Rebecca felt no regret for that decision, only gratitude that the truth had emerged when it did. The revelation had not only nullified Jack's custody claims, but had become the cornerstone of their defense against Senator Hayes's coordinated attacks. "Penny for your thoughts?" Matthew Anderson's voice interrupted her reflection as he joined her at the window, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Rebecca leaned into his touch, a gesture that had become comfortable over the months of shared struggle and gradual healing. "Just thinking about how much has changed. How close we came to losing everything?" Matthew nodded, his gaze shifting to Emily and Harold in the garden. "And how much we gained in the process." The weeks following their discovery had unfolded with the intensity of a military campaign. With Harold's evidence secured and Emily's true parentage confirmed, they had moved quickly to counteract Hayes's multi-pronged assault on their lives. First had come the legal battle. Jack Wilson, confronted with DNA evidence disproving his paternity claim, had initially threatened to expose Rebecca's fraud. But when presented with documentation showing his own signature on divorce papers explicitly denying paternity, along with evidence of his connection to Hayes through Centurion Defense, he had quickly retreated. The investigation into Veteran Support Services had proven more challenging. Hayes had rallied significant political support, framing Anderson's actions as fiscal irresponsibility rather than compassionate leadership. The board had been divided, with several members calling for Anderson's permanent removal. The turning point had come during Anderson's congressional testimony, not just because of the evidence he presented about VA benefit denial patterns, but because of the unexpected allies who joined him. Harold Jenkins, against medical advice, had insisted on attending. Wheeled into the hearing room by Rebecca, the elderly Vietnam veteran had delivered testimony that silenced even Hayes's most vocal supporters. He had named names, cited specific cases, and most devastatingly, connected Hayes's family trust investments to the private healthcare companies benefiting from VA outsourcing. Following Harold had been a parade of witnesses, Veterans, VA employees, military families, all part of the network Harold had built over years of meticulous investigation. Together they had constructed an irrefutable case showing not just bureaucratic failure, but deliberate obstruction for financial gain. Hayes had attempted to discredit Anderson by bringing up Rebecca, suggesting improper use of organizational resources. The strategy had backfired spectacularly when Rebecca herself requested to testify, revealing her father's denied claims and her sister's struggle with addiction following his suicide, all traceable to Hayes's intervention. "Your father would have been proud," Matthew said now, following her gaze to Emily. "Of both you and Emily." Rebecca smiled softly. "I think he would have liked you too." Another soldier who kept his promises. The congressional investigation had led to Hayes's resignation from the Veterans Affairs Committee and a Department of Justice inquiry into his financial dealings. Veteran Support Services had not only survived, but thrived, with new funding and expanded programs emerging from the heightened public awareness of veterans' needs. Anderson had been fully reinstated as director, with a formal apology from the board. Rebecca had returned as well, but in a new capacity, heading a specialized program for veterans' families dealing with loss and transition, drawing on her personal experience with her father and sister's struggles. Their professional relationship had gradually evolved into something deeper, though both had approached this transition with characteristic caution. Emily, perhaps the least surprised by this development, had simply remarked one evening, "It's about time. We're already a family anyway." And Harold Jenkins, against all medical odds, had recovered sufficiently to become a regular presence in their lives. His small apartment at the Veterans Transitional Housing Facility remained his official residence, but he spent most days at Anderson's house teaching Emily about gardening, chess, and the wisdom that only comes from surviving life's harshest battles. "Mom! Matthew! Come see!" Emily called from the garden, breaking into their reflective moment. "Mr. Harold showed me how to make the soil better for the flowers." Rebecca and Matthew exchanged smiles before joining them in the garden, where Emily proudly displayed the compost she had mixed into the planting area. "Well done," Matthew praised, kneeling beside her despite his formal work clothes. He had testimony at another congressional hearing tomorrow, the ongoing work of reforming the systems that had failed so many veterans, but had insisted on being home this afternoon for Emily's gardening project. "Mr. Harold says every living thing deserves good soil to grow in," Emily explained seriously. "Even people." Harold chuckled. Wise beyond her years, this one. Must get that from her mother. His eyes met Rebecca's with understanding. He meant both mothers, the one who had given Emily life, and the one who had given her a home. Rebecca felt a familiar tightness in her throat, the complex emotion that often surfaced when she thought about Grace. Her sister had made countless destructive choices, but in her final act of motherhood, entrusting Emily to Rebecca, she had chosen wisely and selflessly. "We're planting these marigolds for Aunt Grace," Emily continued, returning to her work. "Mr. Harold says they're protection flowers that keep the garden safe. Aunt Grace is protecting me too, even though she's in heaven." Rebecca knelt beside her, helping to firm the soil around a seedling. "That's a beautiful thought, sweetheart." As they worked together in the warm afternoon sun, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A desperate mother's illness, a child's determined trek across the city in a wedding dress, a soldier's unhealed wounds, an elderly veteran's quiet rebellion against injustice. All these threads had woven together, creating something stronger than any of them could have built alone. Later that evening, after Emily had gone to bed and Harold had been driven home by his VA caregiver, Rebecca and Matthew sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. "I spoke with Michael today," Matthew said, referring to his nephew in California. "He's coming for a 2-week visit this summer. He's excited to meet Emily." Rebecca smiled. She'll be thrilled. She's been asking about him ever since you showed her his pictures." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the gentle creak of the swing and distant summer sounds. "I've been thinking," Matthew began, his voice carrying an unusual hint of uncertainty, "about us, about the future." Rebecca turned to study his face, noting the seriousness in his expression. "What about it?" He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small, worn velvet box. "This was my grandmother's. My grandfather gave it to her after he returned from World War II. They had already been married for 3 years, a hasty ceremony before he shipped out, but he wanted to give her a proper ring when he came home." Rebecca's breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a vintage engagement ring with a modest diamond and intricate band. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer," Matthew continued, his steady voice belying the vulnerability in his eyes. "I know we've been through extraordinary circumstances together, and I want you to be certain this is what you want, not just a response to shared trauma or gratitude or—" Rebecca placed her fingers gently against his lips, stopping his uncharacteristic rambling. "Matthew Anderson, I've never been more certain of anything in my life." She took the ring from the box, studying its delicate craftsmanship. "Your grandparents, were they happy? Even after everything he saw in the war?" "They had their struggles," Matthew admitted. "His nightmares, her worries, but they faced them together. She used to say that love isn't about perfect moments, it's about who you choose to weather the storms with." Rebecca slipped the ring onto her finger where it fit as though made for her. "I choose you. I think I have since that first day when you took the time to interview a 6-year-old in a wedding dress." Matthew's smile held all the warmth his military bearing usually concealed. "Best interview of my life." Their kiss was interrupted by a small voice from the doorway. "Are you getting married?" They turned to find Emily watching them, her stuffed elephant clutched in one arm and a knowing smile on her face. "Yes," Rebecca answered simply. "If that's okay with you." Emily considered this momentarily, then nodded with the solemn certainty only children can manage. "It's about time. We need to tell Mr. Harold tomorrow." "He's been waiting too." As Matthew laughed and lifted Emily into his arms, bringing her into their embrace, Rebecca felt a sense of completion she hadn't known was possible. The road had been unimaginably difficult, filled with revelations that had shaken her very identity. Yet somehow, through all the pain and struggle, they had found their way to this moment, not perfect, not unmarked by the scars of their respective journeys, but whole and hopeful nonetheless. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the ongoing fight for veterans' rights, the continuing legal proceedings against Hayes, the everyday work of helping Emily understand her complex origins, the endless task of healing old wounds, both visible and hidden. But tonight, in this moment, with Emily's small form nestled between them and the fireflies dancing in the summer twilight, Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that they would face whatever came next just as they had faced everything else, together, with courage and determination and the unshakable knowledge that even the most broken paths could lead to home. "You know," Emily said sleepily as Matthew carried her back to bed, "I always knew you were a good prince, even when you looked grumpy that first day." "Is that so?" Matthew asked, amusement warming his voice. "Mm-hmm," Emily confirmed, her eyes already closing. "That's why I brought Mom's resume to you. I knew you'd help us." Later, as Rebecca stood in the doorway of Emily's room, watching her daughter, because that's what Emily was, regardless of biology, sleep peacefully, she marveled at the wisdom children sometimes possess that adults have forgotten. Emily had seen through Anderson's stern exterior to the compassionate heart beneath. She had trusted her instincts and acted with courage that would put most adults to shame. And in doing so, She had not only changed their lives, but had set in motion events that would help countless veterans and their families, a ripple effect of goodness stemming from one small girl's determination to help her mother. Matthew joined her in the doorway, slipping an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking?" Rebecca leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. That sometimes the smallest hands build the strongest bridges. He smiled, recognizing Harold's words. "Wise man, our Harold." "Wise man," she agreed. But not as wise as a 6-year-old in a wedding dress. They stood together a moment longer, watching Emily sleep, before quietly retreating to begin planning their shared future. A future made possible by a child's courage, a soldier's integrity, and the unexpected paths that sometimes lead exactly where we need to go. "I love you," Matthew said simply as they returned to the porch swing, the words still new between them but growing more natural with each passing day. "I love you too," Rebecca replied, the words carrying the weight of all they had survived together and all they had yet to build. Above them, stars emerged in the darkening sky, constant, enduring, a reminder that even the longest night eventually gives way to dawn. They had weathered their darkness and found their light. Whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them together, not as perfect people, but as a perfect team. And somewhere, Rebecca liked to think, her father and sister were at peace, knowing that their struggles had not been in vain, that their stories had helped change a broken system, and that the little girl they both loved was safe, protected, and cherished by a family forged not through blood, but through something equally powerful. The courage to see the best in each other when the world showed only the worst. Dear friends, in a world that often forgets the wisdom that comes with our years, this story reminds us that second chances aren't just for the young. Like Matthew and Rebecca, many of us have weathered storms, failed marriages, estranged children, career setbacks, or health challenges. But their journey shows us it's never too late to rebuild. Remember how you once stood tall in uniform or raised children alone or cared for aging parents? That same strength remains within you. The little girl in the wedding dress teaches us that sometimes the bravest act is simply showing up, believing better days are possible. Harold reminds us that our hard-earned wisdom becomes a legacy when shared. Perhaps you too have witnessed injustice that needs challenging or hold knowledge that could help others. Your story isn't finished. It's still unfolding in beautiful, unexpected ways. What unexpected blessing has entered your life after 50 that you never anticipated? Or what wisdom would you share with someone facing a seemingly impossible situation? Please share in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.